Oh, well, I heard one of the children, but she must have muted them and told them.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, we're live on YouTube, I see, Corey. So I think
meetings.
great job.
Suchi, you're killing it. Okay, here we go.
Thank you. I'm
You're
just
okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Tonight is our, oh, I see you, Cora. Tonight is our first LGBTQ storytelling panel. This is something that we're doing in honor of LGBTQ History Month, but also to show that ACA really puts the needs of LGBTQ folks in the community first, and that this is a cause that we really care about, and this is something that we're going to continue to advocate for, raise awareness about in the future and moving forward. So my name is Corey Pluska, and I'm the Executive Director of the Asian Community Alliance. I'd like to welcome our panel members. We have four, there she is. We've got four great panelists this evening that have very graciously opened themselves up to share some lived experience that they think will benefit folks in the Asian community and in the community at large, as it's concerned to identifying within the LGBTQ umbrella. So I'm going to let them briefly introduce themselves really quickly, and I'll just ask everybody, make sure you're muted unless you're speaking. That way we don't have any interference with the folks that are sharing.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go first. So my name is Tao Pham, and my wife and I, we currently live in Urbandale, Iowa, which is a suburb of Des Moines, which is the capital of Iowa. I'm currently a Salesforce administrator at a Fortune 500 company here. We have 2 little wiener dogs, and I think that's the most exciting thing right now.
Yeah, hi everyone, sorry, I just got done working out, so I'm a little out of breath. My name is Wen. I live in Urbandale, like Tao said. I also work at principal with her, not in the same area, because I don't think we can handle that. Yeah.
Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Sweet.
Hi. Karim, do you want to go or should I?
No, you go.
Hi, Katie. I use they, them, their pronouns. I identify as queer and trans, and I am doing my master's in right now. And I have 2 cats, and I live in Fairborn, Ohio. And I've been in US since 4 years, and I guess that's it. Nothing interesting happening right now.
Thanks, Shri.
Well, hi, this is Corinne Laddock, pronouns he, him, located in Toronto. And I've had a long career with Procter & Gamble, but what the bio that was, I think, more about my travel, did not say was I've also lived in several countries, and I'll tell you more about that when my turn comes. But really looking forward to this panel. I think this is very exciting. I've been to Cincinnati, I don't know, more times than I care to kind of remember. But for this to emerge out of Cincinnati and the Asian Community Alliance there, to me, is just so the kind of effort we need in mainstream communities everywhere. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. I'm so excited for this. I'm just going to ask anybody that is tuning in and listening, if you have any questions for our panelists, if you'll just put them in the chat or write them down and hold off till the end. We're going to leave about 30 minutes for questions and answers. Everybody's going to have about 15 minutes to share. So drop them in the chat box or just hold off till the end, and we'll make sure that you have an opportunity to ask those questions, and our panelists will be able to, have some time to think and give thoughtful answers, which I'm sure they're going to be great. So let's get started. We decided to go in alphabetical order. So Kareem, you're up.
Back to me in reverse order from the introduction. So anyway, like I said, delighted to be here. What I wanted to do is just tell you a little bit about what I'm doing today to ground us in the present, and then I'll give you some background. of my parents and the family, because I think that contextualizes my coming out experience. I want to speak a little bit about that. And then I'll tell you where I'm at today in terms of my sense of, what it is to be a gay person and living very happily and being single. Okay. So what I'm doing today, like I said, I had 29 years with Procter & Gamble, and I retired 7 years ago because I just felt it was time. And so I decided to leave Procter & Gamble and then travel. So since then, I've been able to travel to 180 countries, because I think I was about at 80 when I left Procter & Gamble. So I'm at 180 now. And I just checked off my last continent in December before the whole COVID thing came on. So I love travel, and the reason I mention it is because it's my way of understanding the world. So that's one dimension of me. The other one is my volunteer work, which I've been a volunteer in the LGBT community and the United Way and many mainstream communities for about the last 35 to 40 years. And it just really gives me a lot of pleasure to give back to the community. And so today what I do is I actually, spend about 10 or 20 hours a week on my volunteer work. And I've also taken on as a hobby investing, which is really fun. Okay, and it makes sure that I have I'm not diluting my capital. So that's what I'm doing today. A bit about my background. My ethnic origin is Indian. So my father and mother, their origins were from India in a state called Gujarat. And so my dad came to Africa when he was 13 years of age, all alone. And my mom was born in Tanzania, but her father came from another village in Gujarat. And the reason I think that's so important is because when I compare where I am today versus where they were, which is, I don't think there was a railway station, even like 200 kilometers from where mom's dad was born. I mean, we were just really in the, like far, far away from anything, right? So, fast forward, they came to Africa, they got married when dad was 21 and mom was 16. And she, I guess they had a very happy life because they had 9 children and I'm the 9th of them, right? And by the time I was born in this little town in Tanzania, my family was actually, they had become quite prosperous. So they started very, very kind of, with nothing. I mean, he literally landed off a boat when he was 13. But by the time I was born, they were doing very well. So I grew up in a large house with servants, and probably many of us from the diaspora can share this experience. And the reason that's relevant is because as I grew up very much like an Ismaili Muslim kid. And in my book, I have actually written about, kind of the way life deals cards to you and then how you play those cards in life. Because I think everyone gets a set of cards dealt to them in terms of this is just given to you. But life is all about how you choose to play those cards. And so one of the cards I think that was dealt to me is I grew up in an extremely religious Ismaili Muslim community. So we would go to mosque every day. And my father was surrounded by the community, and he played a key role. He was even given a title by the Aga Khan. So they had a good standing. Now, out of that background, they were also kind of progressive, meaning we had parties and there was alcohol served. So it wasn't like we were completely, not. Anyway, it was good. Then we moved to Dar es Salaam, and before we moved to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, I was 9 years old, 10 years old, and by that time I knew that there was, in my words, back then, that there was something not right with me, meaning why do I not like members of the opposite sex? So this burden I carried with me through to Dar es Salaam, through to Nairobi, I came to Toronto, I went to undergrad, and then I think after undergrad, I almost wanted to escape the get married and settle down, get a car and, dogs and all of that kind of story. So I ran off to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I studied in Paris after that. I went to London, And then I came back here having finished my master's. And that was the time I was personally ready to reconcile my sexuality. So it took me like 15 years of bottling it all up, carrying the burden, thinking there was something wrong with me. I remember when I was 17, living as a lodger here in Toronto, I would cry at night because it's like, why did I inherit this fate? Why can't I just be like the rest of my friends? And when I was 17, I wrote suicide notes, and it just really was not a very good experience. But, thank goodness, when I was 25, I had the courage to come out. And so my coming out took the following sequence. I actually went to a couple of bars in Toronto, and horrified as I was, I met someone I knew. And so that was, while it was very horrifying, it became a pillar of support for me. And so I started finding other people from the Smiley community who were out and were okay being out. So that August 9th of 1982, I took the courage of coming out to my parents. And because we'd not lived with each other for a long time, we were living together at the time. And I remember that I would hear their voices, before they passed away. They were married for 64 years. It was a very, very good marriage. And I would listen to them chatting away into the night and so forth. So it was around maybe close to midnight, because I was awake and I thought, tonight's the night, and it was raining. And so I knocked on the door. And my mom said, "Beta, come in." Beta is child, as in an endearment in our language. And she said, "Beta, come in." And so I went in and I sat down on the chair next to the dresser. And I started to come out to them, but I had no words to explain to them, because there's no word in our language for homosexuality or gay. There just isn't a word for that. So finally I blurted out. I said, look, I'm not, attracted to women, because the story was I was the youngest child. They called me the little prince, and, when are you going to get married? So I had to kind of debunk a whole bunch of expectations in that encounter. So, so when I told them and they finally understood, there was silence. There was silence for a very long time. And then my mother asked me 3 questions. She said, so note, it's like, it's a mother, it's a woman who are strong, and so she asked me, she said, "Why did you not tell us before today? What held you back, Beta?" Meaning, why did you go through so much pain? The second question she asked me was, are you okay health-wise? Because in 1982, the AIDS pandemic was just coming to the surface. And so she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm okay." And the third was, will you be able to live, a life with another person of your choice? And is that a problem? Those were the 3 questions Mom asked me, but I could see that my dad was very disturbed. My mom was heartbroken. I knew they wouldn't sleep the night. They would cry. But Mom was a stronger one in that equation. At least she responded, and I went to bed. And I waited for a little bit for them to respond. And after maybe 2 months, it was about this time of the year, and Dad suddenly said, "Look, Beta, the trees are changing color outside. And that's what God has planned for us. It's nature. And who you are is like that. It's just nature." And so it took him about 6 to 8 weeks to come to terms with the fact that, what I was not an anomaly. It was just a part of what the planet has to offer. And so then I proceeded to start telling my brothers and sisters, and every situation was different. I can tell you, every single one of my sisters cried, like a lot. And one of my brothers even said, "Should we approach the Aga Khan, who's our spiritual leader, to see if there's a cure for it?" So again, fast track, it took everyone a couple of months, a few months, to come around the fact that I was gay. I was not going to get married. Like I said, there were so many expectations and myths and, all in a package that I was trying to debunk. So, so I went on and proceeded to tell my sisters and brothers and then my nieces and nephews and some friends. And it was about a 4-month journey for me. And so when I celebrated my 25th birthday in December of 1982, I was, I felt liberated. And so that's how I came out. Now, there are 3 learnings I would like to offer you. One is that people say coming out is an event, and in my opinion, it's not an event, it's a process. You keep coming out all the time because you know what, the moment you think you're out, then you're surrounded by circumstances in which you feel terrified. And you go, oh, I can't possibly tell them I'm gay. What will they think? And when so Procter & Gamble moved me to India, to Japan, then to Russia, and then to Romania. But when I went to Russia, I was given very explicit advice that be careful. So in Russia, it was almost like I had to go back in the closet because, you just never know what the reactions would be there. So coming out is a process and it's a journey. It's not an event. That's one learning. The second learning is that these, things like coming out are layered. And so interesting in my life, when I talked about the cards dealt to me versus the cards I played, in the early 80s, I suddenly discovered my Indian identity. Now, no one else in my family, actually thinks of themselves as Indian because they think of themselves as African. I was the first one who said, no, I think those are what my roots were, and that Africa is just a transition point. And I started falling in love with Indian literature, Indian classical dance, all of that. But it was almost like the moment I peeled that layer, I was ready to peel the layer of my identity. So it's important to recognize sometimes, trying to peel a layer out of sequence may not quite work. We all have multiple identities. And so peeling them off in the right sequence, whatever is organic to you, makes sense. And the third and final learning that I want to give you is, at least in my case, and I know everyone's not like that, and you don't need to agree with me, but once you come out, then you need to be, and I found the need to be an advocate. So if people don't respond favorably, I will continue to educate. I'll continue to advocate as opposed to judge them, because people come from very different experiences you don't know. They might say the wrong things, at the wrong time. And so if you do choose to come out, then be prepared to hold their hand, in terms of their journey as well, because they're coming to terms with who you are is going to help them, not just with me, but with a lot of other people. And so I continue to be that advocate. And I know that, we watched films like Harvey Milk, with my mom and dad and so forth. And so in 1993, I had organized, by this time I was very active in the movement. I was in newspapers, I was all over. And so we organized a global South Asian gay men's conference, and my father spoke at the dinner in 1993. My mom wrote an article in Kush Khayal, which is a magazine that we were producing. So they came a long way. Now, so that's the coming out. Where am I today? Today, I kind of feel that I couldn't imagine life any other way. People say you're alone, whatever. I was speaking to someone today who said, for single people, I really worry about them during COVID. And I go, actually, I am so totally fine. I have my bubble, I do my own thing. And I love being single. I love being footloose and fancy free. And I love living my life the way I want to. And that's not a problem to me as well. So, I fought that battle for a long time with people saying, surely you can find someone. And even today, when I'm dressed up and I send something to my brothers and sisters, they'll say, oh my goodness, you are ripe for an invite, meaning there's an expression in our language where someone is going to throw, they call it a mago, but it means someone, a family is going to come out and try to grab you, or you are very eligible and so on and so forth. But it's taken a long time for me to explain to people, look, being single is actually completely fine. We don't need to. So I have to fight the same battle that I did when coming out, to convince people that being single is actually a very good state of mind. It's a matter of choice. And so, so those are in summary my experiences. And I'm happy to answer any questions people have at the end.
Thank you so much. I love how you just went through the timeline like that. That was really fantastic. Okay, so we'll jump to Shri.
Hi, I'm Shri. I use they, them, their pronouns. And first of all, I want to thank Kareem for sharing his story. And thank you for sharing. And yeah, just a minute. Yes, I am born in South India in a state called Andhra Pradesh. And my parents were, say, I would say child marriage. My mom was around 14 and my dad was around 28 when they got married. And they were actually pretty open about a lot of other stuff in terms of like how they handled a lot of serious issues in terms of giving freedom of whether in terms of educational choices or whether in terms of religious choices. They were open about a lot of things. But when I kind of started to struggle in terms of fitting into one box of like masculinity, or that men should act certain way, that you're a man, you're not supposed to cry in front of people, you're supposed to tough up, or you're supposed to be the protector or not be vulnerable. And those are the boxes that never seemed to fit me, and I always struggled with it. And there was never a word or a thing that I could identify with me. Like I always thought it was like an internal struggle, and it had been there forever. Now that I think about it, and media was not very good in terms of portrayal of queer people or trans people in India. In the community itself, trans people are always isolated and segregated from the society, especially in India, and always are forced to not even get education or given proper healthcare or any other necessary situations. I guess it's the same situation everywhere else in the world for trans people and queer people. But I did not see anyone like a possibility model that I can look up to and think that, oh, I can be queer and trans and still be successful or still be okay, and people will respect me. That was one of the things that was not there, because I did not know anyone who was queer or trans, or I might have seen people who are queer and trans, but everyone that I am with had so much hatred or ignorance towards them that it was not an ideal interest for me to come out or me to even explore who I was. So I always suppressed that part of me till I kind of was around 19. I came to USA for my undergraduate education, and actually that's the time I started exploring more about my identities. And I guess I started questioning more, why is the world this way, or why is it not okay for me to be who I am? And I guess I started seeing more possibility models, like people who look like me on media who are coming out and saying their stories. And that kind of gave me confidence, but it was also very scary experience, because at that time my roommates were homophobic, and it was a constant struggle every day to navigate who I was. So at one point I was considering to like give up on everything and just, there's this that I'm not made right, and always questioning myself. And I guess I was speaking to one of the therapists one day, and that's when they kind of told me it is okay to be who I am, and it's not a disease that I am this way, or it's not something that I should be worried about, or something that is not something that I should be hiding about myself. And that's the time I kind of told myself for the first time that I am definitely not straight and definitely not fitting into the box of what society views a man should be. So then I started questioning more and more, and I met LGBTQA office at Wright State University. I met PD. I started going to affinity network groups and a lot of resources, and hearing a lot of people who had similar experiences, even though they don't always look like me, but there are people who had similar experiences with family or friends when they came out. So it was a lot of information that made me more confident about who I am. And that's when I kind of decided that I am gender fluid, in terms of that my gender is not defined by the boxes that people try to fit, and more on this, if genders are two extremes, and I'm more like flowing in between all over the place. And so sometimes I like to most of the times I'm in my sweatpants, but more, when I feel like it, I sometimes make clothes. I've been exploring more of my cultural side, and I'm trying to make saris and stuff. It's more like hot glue guns, but it still works. And so that kind of has been my experience of trying to be more open about myself. In terms of coming out to parents, I'm not out to my parents for several reasons. I tested waters with my parents. So if anyone is trying to come out to their parents and are worried, that's one of the techniques you can try. Is that, so what I did was I said that, oh, my friends that I know are queer, and I kind of wanted to gauge what their reaction would be. And it was not very good at all so I was like, I'm not gonna come out to you, probably never. But so I that was a big struggle in terms of like family who is supposed to love you, or that's what society says, that they'll love you for no matter who you are. And when that breaks apart, you're in a situation where you're like, you don't know what to do. And that's where the concept of chosen family comes from. So I started finding people who are more like me, who had the community feeling that people had. And that's where I started meeting a lot of people from Wright State LGBTQ community. And they become my chosen family. They helped me a lot in terms of recognizing who I am. And as Kareem was saying, that coming out is not an event, and it's a process, and has been a process, because I feel like every time I feel like I know something about my gender or sexuality, the other day I will be like, that's something new about my sexuality. Maybe I'm not pansexual anymore. Maybe I am this. So it's a constant process, and it keeps flowing. And I guess few other things that I wanted to say is that in terms of identities, when a lot of identities intersect, for me, it's being Indian, being brown, or being queer, being trans, and all those identities, when they intersect, there's a lot of exploration that you do, and you figure like the more and more I learn about myself, I feel like even within Indian culture, trans people were given at most prestigious positions before the sodomy rules were brought by British or colonizers. And that change that happened is such interesting facts that our culture had been accepting, but it has been kind of colonized over years with the sodomy rules, and now it affects us. And knowing that history about where I come from and trying to learn more about myself has been very helpful in exploring who I am, I guess. I guess I'll stop there. And if you have any questions for me, you can leave it in the text.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. You did great. Okay, last but not least.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and I'll go first. So my name is Tao Pham, and like I said before, I'm a Salesforce administrator at a Fortune 500 company here. So my primary intersectional identities is that I identify as Vietnamese American and lesbian, and I go by she, her pronouns. So I'm a child of immigrants. My parents immigrated here from Vietnam in the late 80s to give their children a better life. And I would say most of my hardships in life have been balancing having those two identities, always feeling like I kind of have to pick one or the other and I can't be both, especially when I'm like at a Vietnamese event and I feel like I have to hide my gayness, or if I'm at vice versa, hiding that part. And I think that's a very common theme that people with intersectional identities, people who are LGBT and Asian, have to face, which is really hard. So back to me, I currently reside in Iowa with my wife, Wynn, over here, and I don't know why, but we're wearing the same color.
Really?
We are, yeah.
Oh.
So we're twinning today. Another identity I have is I'd like to add that I'm a baker as a result of the pandemic, but I stopped because I was killing everyone in my household. Like, no one needs 5 types of brownies in one weekend. So I've stopped doing that. So yeah, I was born here in Iowa. In the second year that my parents were in the United States. So growing up, my parents, they worked really hard, making sure that all their kids were supported. My dad would often take the night shift and my mother would often take the morning shift just to make sure there was someone there. And my sisters and I are so far apart in age that we're babysitting each other. Growing up, my parents made it so apparent that they sacrificed a lot by risking their lives to come here to make sure that we had a better life, could get a great education. And I think that adds to the pressure, especially with people identify as Asian, to be what their parents want them to be and be what their culture wants them to be. Growing up, I knew that I had to abide by these things. I had to marry well to the opposite sex. I had to be educated, and I had to fit all these certain molds. If I did anything against that, then I was disobeying my parents and I was disobeying my culture, which was an internal conflict I've had all my life. And so growing up, I was always a high achiever. I couldn't handle having a B. Like, I couldn't handle anything like less than perfect. And I mean, on the outside, that looked great, but on the inside, like, I beat myself up a lot. I grew up with low self-esteem issues. Like, I took it out in unhealthy ways on my body, like on the way that I treated myself. And when I was younger, I had an idea starting elementary school that was different from everyone else. You know, all the girls liked certain boys, and I just kind of felt like I followed along. I got a boyfriend when I was in elementary school, and I kind of felt like that was the equivalent of getting the newest toy that everyone wanted, because I just thought that's what you had to do, but I didn't really care. I didn't even want to touch them. I knew my skin color was different very early on. People would ask me if I was Chinese or tell me to go back to my country, or they'd make fun of my parents' accents. And that was kind of hard to handle, like, growing up. Like, I mean, this is my life, you know, why is it so different? And so I think that I was very aware that I looked different, and to even grasp the idea that I was different in other areas, such as being gay, like, I didn't want to admit that. I think in middle school, I began having more crushes on my female friends, and it was always the straight girls, which really sucked. And I don't know why I did this, but I told a lot of them that I liked them. And I don't know, that was like a really bad decision. It made things a little awkward for a bit. So how I came out is, you know, after a bit of like self-exploration, Googling things on the internet, and, you know, sometimes that's not great either. I really had no model for what it meant to be LGBT. My parents didn't have any LGBT friends. Like, I was just around like no one, you know, being in the Midwest. I didn't know anyone that was Asian that was LGBT. So a lot of it I learned through the media. Like I remember like when I was younger watching things like the L Word like secretly because I just needed some kind of semblance what being a lesbian was. And it got to a point where, you know, I was sure that I was different and I couldn't hide it from my parents anymore. And so I told my mother one night, and I told her I was bi because I thought that was a safe place or a safe, happy medium zone. I mean, it wasn't really. So I told her that, and I don't think she was really surprised, but it did catch her off guard. And I think the hardest part of that was I totally emphasized with my parents that they didn't grow up somewhere where homosexuality or anything like that was part of the picture. So I understood that they were coming from that, but it was just hard to know that we weren't on the same page. And also the hardest part was them not accepting it didn't change the way I felt about them. I still love them very much. And growing up with that was really, really hard. And I, struggled with that for the next couple of years throughout college and whatnot. Just feeling like I couldn't make them happy. But I would say it took time, took a lot of conversations. And it got to a point where they knew that they couldn't change me as well. And I think what helped my parents a lot was I did have great allies in my life, and I will stress the importance of having great allies. My older sister is a really great one, for example. I remember many times where my parents would say stuff and my sisters would always like pitch in for me. And I remember one thing in particular, back when Tyler Clementi, if you remember this, he was someone that went to Rutgers, I believe, who took his own life. And my mom saw it in the news and she was asking us, why that happened. And, we told her it was a result of likely being bullied for being LGBT. And my sister gave her a reality check and said, would you rather have a happy daughter or no daughter? And I think that helped open her mind a little bit. And I also think she realized that I'm really no different than anyone else. I mean, I brush my hair, I play boring farming resource management games that take hours. And, I graduated, I got a job. So it's not like my life turned to crap or anything. So I think that opened them up that my life wasn't necessarily the stereotype of what they thought it would be. So I guess maybe to talk about my wife a little bit, we met when we were in college, and kind of corny, but we met at a leadership conference, so nothing super exciting. And we just kind of clicked from there. We were friends for a little bit, and she friend zoned me, so I didn't know what was going to happen. Like she would text me and tell me, oh, hey, I kissed this girl tonight. And I was like, okay, so she's not interested. And then she invited me, she was living in Minnesota and then I was living in Iowa. So we were doing long distance. She invited me up for Twin Cities Pride. And this is kind of cliche, but we were at a gay bar and we just ended up dancing and we kissed. And then the rest became history. We did long distance for a couple of years. And then I got a job here in Des Moines first, and she moved down here. So that's, I guess, kind of where our love story is. We've been married for almost 5 years. And a lot of times people can't fathom that we're together. A lot of people think that we're sisters or my cousin or that I'm her mother, which is really offensive to me because she's older than me. So I don't know why I come off as the mom. But I guess some last points I want to go through is I do want to stress that allyship is really important. And I think a lot of people struggle with what that looks like and how they can show their allyship. Like, I think you can do it in so many different small ways. Like for me, when I think about the workplace, if I have a coworker who just reaches out to me just to find out more about my life, about my wife, if something significant has happened in current events, ask me how I'm feeling, checking in. I think that's really great. I think we could spend less time thinking we aren't doing enough to support each other and really just doing it and being a good person. I also think also, listen, emphasize, and be aware of how your own privileges can be used for good and help other people. Like the story I tell about my sister using her straight privilege to help me. I mean, that's something that you could definitely use. I think people get offended a lot when they hear the words white privilege or privilege in general. And I think if we reframe that and think about how we can use it to help other people, that would help a lot. And I would echo the belief that coming out is not an event. It's definitely a process for sure. I don't think it ever ends. Like I'm constantly coming out to like other family members who don't know, or even at the hair salon, the doctor, like going to the doctor is always awkward because every time I come in and I say I'm nauseous or dizzy, they ask if I'm pregnant. And then they ask like, how do you know? And then I have to explain that I'm with a woman. The last time I went, the doctor asked, are you sure you're not like doing anything with other men? And I said, no, I'm pretty sure. And it's another layer that LGBT people have to deal with healthcare as well. And also for anyone that's LGBT and Asian, just know that you aren't alone. And also, if you're in the Midwest, don't think that you're the only one, because evidently like we're here too. And there's a community of folks who are just like you and want to help you as well. And there are, Asian lesbian couples as you see here. So yeah, that's our story, and I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to my wife, Wynn.
Yeah, hi everyone. My story is very similar to Tao's. I was born in Sioux City, Iowa. My family is actually fortunate enough to be sponsored by a church, which is nice, but it doesn't really help with the whole like identity, because I guess for me, I didn't really accept myself until like almost my senior year of high school. And that's because, I grew up in like a very white dominated community in school, and like my family, they were kind of like not strictly religious, but religious. So like the whole like religion thing kind of scared me and like made me stay in like the closet for so long. And like throughout that time, I was just like very angry with myself and like trying to figure out who I was. My sister, who is kind of like how our older sister were like are huge allies to us, and she knew, and she kind of like knew what I was struggling with. So in a way, kind of hurt her that I didn't really felt okay yet with myself until like college. But yeah, like what Tao said, I went to college at the University of Minnesota, and pretty much like when I left and like went to Minneapolis, I felt actually comfortable with myself and like was able to express who I was fully. And just kind of like a little advice or like a little like word of wisdom, like you can't really come out to people unless you're coming out to yourself. Like you have to accept yourself first before you can like have others accept you, which I felt like was a really huge thing for me growing up. But yeah, like, so I went to Minnesota, kind of met Tao. She told you our little story. I moved down here, and kind of like what everyone's been saying, coming out is always a process, and like you have to almost pick and choose. Sadly we live in a world where you can't assume everyone's gonna be okay with your identity. You don't know how they're going to react. And I guess for me, growing up and having like that kind of paranoid background, I've always been hesitant of telling people who I'm dating, how I feel, like anything. Yeah.
And as a couple, there's some hard things to navigate. Like she's less comfortable with PDA than I am, especially with the setting. Like if we're at an event that's Vietnamese, like we don't even like act like a couple, because even though we are comfortable with who we are, we still don't feel comfortable in that area. So you could be fully out and proud, but then it's always a journey too.
Yeah. Kind of like you have to pick and choose your battles. We act like cousins sometimes. For a while, I was Tao's cousin with like her family, which I got it. I understood why, but then it sucked, which I feel like a lot of people can relate. You kind of like have to live two identities. My parents were actually okay with me coming out when I came out to them on my birthday, surprisingly. Ironically, my mom was watching like a Vietnamese skit that they were doing. It was like a comedic skit. And the skit was about a gay son and a lesbian daughter. And when I told her, she was like, oh, I'm totally okay. Look what I'm watching. Like, I'm totally okay with this. My father was very hesitant at first and it took him a while to understand it. And I was kind of scared, but he eventually, like after an hour, he like walked out of the house, came back, and he was like, do you want your car washed? I'll go wash it for you. Which in Asian dad terms, it's I still love you no matter what. Like Asian men are like, for at least Vietnamese fathers, are not very expressive with their words and emotions. And so like him saying that to me related that he was okay with me. And to this day, they treat Tao like their own daughter, and they treat us with like really a lot of respect, which is a huge like progress from them. So yeah.
Yeah. And I guess in terms of what we like to do for fun, I'm obsessed with TikTok and making videos. I love Korean dramas, K-pop, exercising. I recently started taking stand-up comedy classes. So that's the most exciting things in terms of hobbies.
Yeah. Oh, I'm also really into Pokemon Go. So if you play Pokemon Go, you can send your friend code to me. Or video games, yeah. One or two.
Yeah, her thing is Pokemon and then tattoos.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to show off your tattoo that you just got?
Oh, I can see that.
It's a Pokemon tattoo.
I can see that. It's Magic Heart.
Okay, so I think that wraps up our story.
Thank you both for sharing. Wow, everybody is just so amazing. And I love that we have a couple here. It's like possibility models. So I'm going to open it up for questions. So you can feel free to type it in the chat, or you can just come out and ask questions. And panelists, you can ask questions of each other. I know we talked about that before. So like we're all in this together. And if there's anything that you'd like to ask each other, go for it. You all touched on intersectionality. You all touched on mental health. You all touched on, hold on, I took a lot of notes. And you all touched on not having any possibility models here and not in the United States. So even though all four of you have extremely different stories, there's still a lot of correlation in between. Is that the right word? Sorry. There's still a lot of sameness in between everybody's stories.
I get you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm using words. COVID. Okay, so I just wanted to, so I'm going to open it up for everybody to ask questions, and I'd like for us to have a facilitated conversation because that's where we all learn and grow. And like Tao was talking about, if you want to be an ally, a great way to do it is to ask questions, when the opportunity is available, not necessarily just asking questions of that one queer person, because that's tokenism. So, okay.
Hi, this is Joy. I have a question. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
I'm curious, like when you come out, do you then sometimes feel like people started to discriminate you more, or like opportunities that you might have gotten before you're no longer getting? And how do you then deal with that? Or do you feel like people treat you the same way as before? Then that's awesome. I was just curious if there's any change with like at the workplace or outside of your immediate family, how people then treat you.
I can start with so it's the experience of me coming out to people has been different for every person. So sometimes it's been that people have looked at me that I'm a completely different person, or have isolated me completely because I came out to them, or said things like, oh, it's fine, you're queer, but just don't come for us, or in terms of very transphobic and homophobic stuff was said during that time. And some people are, or at least from my experiences, there's been a lot of people that I came out to have been a lot of queer people already, so it's been easier experience to come out to them. But in terms of coming out to straight people or family, it's I think there's the notion that somehow magically I become a different person because I'm queer or trans is I guess it's not true, because I'm still the same person. I might be using a different name, I'm dressing differently, but I'm embracing who I am more rather than just hiding myself. So you should be more happier for who I am now. And I guess coming out is very personal. So if someone is coming out to anyone, that means I'm trusting you with something. And that means, imagine someone coming out, that means they're trusting you and also feel safe enough to even do it in front of you. So
I love it. So you feel like for a number of them, the relationship goes even deeper with that trust.
yes.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you.
If anyone else in the panel want to answer or share anything else on this question.
Yeah, from my experience, coming out has been more good than bad. And it's the reaction is, sorry, there was a pop-up on my computer, but the experience has been pretty positive. Hasn't always been easy. In terms of family, like it was really rough at first, the reaction, but I remember after coming out, I felt so much better, and no one could really take that away, no matter how negative the reaction was, because you don't have to kind of hide that and have that like on your shoulders. But I mean, having a negative reaction is still tough no matter what. But I'm so glad that I did. With friends and work and all that stuff has been pretty positive, and I would agree that does deepen your relationship, because when you're bringing your most authentic self to work or wherever you are, that's where you could really be yourself and excel. Like when I think about the workplace, there was a time where I wasn't out and I didn't feel like I was performing the best way that I could. I wasn't building the relationships that I could with my colleagues. And once I came out, it just really changed a lot. I started doing a lot better at work. I talked about my personal life a lot more. I didn't hide what I was doing on the weekends. So I think that it was great overall. And I mean, and I don't really care as much as what people think of me. If I come out to someone and they, think differently, then it's really on them for not being accepting. And, I'd rather just be open about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the reason why I didn't come out a lot in high school is like I told a few friends to kind of like test the waters. They were accepting, but they didn't like really listen. Like they would be like, oh, that's cool. And then immediately say, oh, what do you think of that boy across the street? It's like, did you really listen? So that's why with me growing up, I was very hesitant, like who I told. But generally it's been very good. I've had like one case where I did kind of like let it slip that I was married to a woman. And I guess I couldn't really tell if the person was homophobic or not, because when we kept working, she would treat me differently than she would with other people. And so luckily it was like a temporary rotation within my role that I was working with. And so like when my leader came to me about like how I was doing, I kind of was just very honest and just kind of made more focus on like, I don't think this role's for me, versus like pinning it on what I was going through. And like, I was trying to just, knowing that was temporary, I made it my best situation, the best situation, stay positive and just try to get through it until the role ended. I get that doesn't apply to a lot of things. So usually when I find someone doesn't take how we are like react well, I tend to be very like almost protective of like my group of friends and like kind of like slowly just like stay like neutral and like just don't start any fires and just kind of like, keep staying like each other's lanes in a way, just to be very civil, and then find yourself like a way safely out of that situation before like anything bad happens.
Thank you both for sharing. I love the point about being true to yourself and authenticity. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Joy, my experience is probably an intergenerational kind of juxtaposition, right? Because today, when I come out, it's mostly positive. In fact, it's always positive. because of the
That's
authentic.
awesome.
And yeah, it's always positive. But I also live in an environment where, you know, in Ontario we had a premier who was a lesbian, and she
Mm,
voted in. So I think I am, you know, in that sense privileged, you know, that we live in this environment, right? And
mhm.
now, but when I came out, you know, appreciation of the honesty. The second one was a staggered acceptance, and the third one was they just did not want to, you know me. Now those were in the minority, but even at a progressive company like P&G, I was told maybe about 12 years ago at a retirement dinner for
Mhm.
who used to be my boss. And there were some old timers there, and they said, "You do know that your promotion to X to Y was stopped because they didn't like you."
Oh.
Okay. But I think we've come a long, long time. So that's
Mm.
one kind of trajectory. The other one is even today, you know, I mean, they know I'm gay and all of that. That's not an issue. But I don't think people would understand every aspect of my lifestyle. So, you know, while I'm not into leather or anything like that, if I was to share, you know, some of those stories of what happens in the community, I think I might lose people because it's just like they're not there, you know? And so, as we've both said, you know, Tao and myself, it's a process. And there are certain attributes of our community that I think we know because we come from Stonewall and, you know, that kind of a very, you know, a rebellious sort of a culture. And so, you know, a huge part of me is my intersectional. So, you know, in protecting, you know, LGBT, I will also actually protect the rights of women and Black people and brown people and so on and so forth. So that's another layer that people, you know, I'm trying to educate, you know, to say, hey, look, you know, if you're a minority, you're a minority. And if you're a minority, we all need to hold hands. And in India, that would mean the caste system, that would mean anything. But, you know, if you're in trouble and you're a minority, I'm actually with you. That aspect of my identity, I think, you know, some people still, you know, will get there.
I love it. Thank you for sharing your courageous and inspiring story, Karim.
Thank you.
think Karim did bring a really important point of like how one community or one minority influences other minority. Like I feel like a lot of LGBTQ movements have been inspired from Stonewall movements started by Black trans women of color or Black trans women, and how that influenced a lot of people too with all the rights, even in USA. It's because of what they have done, and standing in together is what's needed, and especially minorities sticking together and working towards bettering our lives is what's needed.
Yeah,
I think
I
Alisa has a question.
Um, I was wondering, has anyone ever experienced religion being used as a way to discourage lifestyle, and how have you dealt with that?
Who wants to go first?
I can go. I have a shot. My parents kind of raised us more that all religions are equal, is like different interpretations kind of thing, but most of the times it does not translate in terms of queerness or transness, even though a lot of religions have had queer people or LGBTQ characters throughout the context, and a lot of the times communities itself use it to discriminate it in terms of especially in terms of Hinduism. This has been a lot of LGBTQ characters throughout Hinduism, but in terms of how we treat trans people in India and how religion is specifically used to isolate people is one of the example. And a lot of the times it has been used to discriminate people, especially in terms of me. There's been a lot of Christian organizations in USA who were trying, for the fact that I am queer, they're trying to reform me in certain sort, and that was where a lot of religions are being used, that in a form of trying to correct my mistakes of being queer or trans. And I'm curious how they would do it, but it would not work. That a lot of the times religion is used to discriminate people.
Tao, you go next, I'll go after.
Okay, yeah. I will say I'm pretty fortunate that religion hasn't really been an issue. In my family, we didn't really grow up with organized religion. I currently identify as an atheist. I think the only time where religion is kind of worried to be is when we're planning our wedding. I mean, nothing really happened, but when you're planning a wedding as like a non-straight couple, you have to think about whether you have the possibility of someone denying to serve you because of who you are. And I have friends who've had like photographers and et cetera deny giving them a service because it didn't align with their religious beliefs. So that is a real fear that people do have. And I'm certainly aware of that. But that's so far been my experience with religion. I don't think I've had anyone tell me like I would go to hell or anything per se, which I'm fortunate enough not to have experienced, but I know that there's so many who have, and I really feel for those who do.
Yeah, I guess for me, I never had anyone tell me, but because knowing that my family was sponsored by a church and like they gave so much thanks to the church for sponsoring them to bring them over to hear from the conflict in Vietnam, that you kind of felt obligated to kind of like follow their I guess religion and like kind of like do what they do. And so I never had anyone tell me because I never really told anyone that I was gay. So I kind of like had that internalized like fear about religion. And I think it took like talking to people who identify as queer and who have their faith in their own religion to like kind of like find that balance, I guess, and then just kind of like use their advice and like their teachings to like, if you do come across someone that is using religion to kind of sway your lifestyle, like you can relay back on those and like help you transition through those like awkward conversations.
So I will give you, is it Alisa? Okay. So I'll give you a universal answer and I'll give you a personal answer. So the answer to your question is religion is definitely an issue in our community. It's a huge issue. There are so many Bible thumpers out there, you know, Quran lovers out there. There are churches, organizations that actually donate to anti-LGBT causes. So people have made it a mission of theirs, you know, and it's scary to see. It's not widely publicized, but I see it all the time. And I think we as a community cannot underestimate their power, whether it's in the US or it's in West Africa or other countries where there are absolutely anti-LGBT movements, you know, coming from the church or whatever, you know, faith. So that's the universal answer. I think it's a huge issue for our community at large. The personal answer is, you know, for myself, you know, being an Ismaili Muslim, I often get thrown the, you know, is this Quranic? Is this, is this that? You know, is it right by the Quran and so forth? So when I was appointed the chair of the Aga Khan Social Welfare Board, which happens to be one of the highest positions in our community in Canada, and I was the first openly gay man appointed. I actually had to meet with the president and vice president of our council just to make sure that they had security for me in case there was something that happened. And unbeknownst to me, so when I got appointed, there were faxes coming in from missionaries and people like that saying you're doing something very anti-Islamic by appointing this man because he's openly gay and what are you doing? This is not, you know, according to our Sharia and so forth. And then I discovered later on that they were actually following me around and taking videos. And it was a miserable, miserable year of my life because they got videos of me at Halloween. The one and only time I've dressed up in drag, they got it on video, you know, because it was Halloween and I was, you know, we were all dressed in Indian garb. And so I guess my experience has been just be cautious. Don't take things for granted because it's out there and it's very real. Now I don't experience anything like that. But within my community, you're still not allowed same-sex marriages. They will do baptisms. There have been several baptisms of lesbian, you know, wives who have adopted children and so forth, but they've stopped short. So we continue to fight that battle. Sorry, I don't mean to bring you down, but it's just a dose of reality.
One quick addition, just to add to that, there are a lot of queer and trans people who are religious. There are a lot of people who still follow faith, and it's their version of faith and not the hateful version that world preaches. And a lot of the times communities see that we're all atheists and we are maybe agnostic or maybe do not believe, we're like anti-religious elements, but there are a huge part of community that is involved in faith, and there's a huge part of the community that is not, and that's the beauty of the community, I say.
Okay.
This is Yan Shay. I have a question. Before all of you came out, did you have someone whom you trusted, who was your guiding light, or someone that you can confine with your struggle? And how is that important in your life?
So I'll go first this time, Yen, because the simple answer for me is no. I didn't. You know, I didn't confide in anyone until I was very comfortable coming out to myself, because I thought that if I didn't have the strength to do it on my own, then, you know, that was just my philosophy at the time. But what Tao said earlier on is building allies was something I did very quickly after, you know, because then you need trusted confidants to kind of take you through the journey.
May I ask, was that struggle unbearable at times?
That struggle was, I think before I came out, it was a little bit unbearable sometimes, because I felt like I was carrying a burden. And, you know, on the one hand, there was a pressure of when you're getting married, when you're getting married, when you're getting married. And on the other hand, I was kind of bottling all of this up inside me. So yeah, so it's like a little caterpillar struggling to come out as a butterfly, you know? But once I came out, I just needed some people who gave me the wings and supported me. So those are transitions. So then I recruited a lot of allies, and those allies really helped me. You know, so one of the first allies I recruited was, not recruited, I'm still very good friends with him, you know, after all these years, was someone that they knew. My parents knew. And so that validation becomes very important for them, you know, much less me.
Thank you.
Yes, I will add a bit to that. Coming out is a lot of struggle, because it almost feels like there are two parts of us that is constantly fighting with each other, is trying which is true and which is not. It almost feels like we're at a constant battle, and as Karim said, it feels like a burden on us. And finding that person to confide in is a scary job, and also trying to find someone who is willing to be able to listen to us is also hard. For me, therapy was the first thing that I started out with, and I know it's not an option for a lot of people, but a lot of times there are communities out large, like maybe reaching out to people on internet with there are resources like, for me it was going to therapy are other resources like there's Trevor's project, or there is OSTEM for STEM people who are LGBTQ to reach out to them, or trying to like conferences or panels like this, showing that there's a possibility of being queer and trans, also being Asian, and still existing and surviving in our spaces and being who we are, like accepting ourselves is that's where I guess we'll get the confidence in ourselves from. And if anyone wants to reach out or talk to need any more resources, can email me or can reach. I'm here for any more resources.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, I think it definitely shaped my experience and like honestly saved my life just to have people who supported me along the way, because I knew it would be different with my parents. Like having my siblings were mainly my guiding lights throughout the coming out process. Like I told them first because I knew they would be okay with it. You know, I knew my older sister would be. My little sister was like 3 or 4 at the time, so I mean, she had to be. And even at 3 or 4, like she wasn't even surprised I was gay, which is kind of funny. And then also children, they aren't born with hatred. That kind of, I guess it's learned. That's what I've noticed. Like it's surprising how giving and how understanding children are too. And then I was lucky enough that at a young age, like being in high school when I came out, and just depending what school you go to, I did have supportive friends as well, you know, straight and all different backgrounds. And then my high school had a gay straight alliance, and being a part of that really helped a lot because I was feeling like I was missing out on having an LGBT community. And when I joined that club, that helped a lot. Be able to see people who was experiencing the same thing I was, and like people who I could reach to. Having like teachers and counselors in the past helped too. Like having an authoritative adult figure, I think really made a difference. Like having someone like that tell you that you're worthy of something, like someone you could trust. And then I was thinking about the comment on therapy. You know, when things got really rough, you know, I had therapy as well, to be able to talk to someone. So I definitely believe that having support really helps a lot. And you know, doing this journey alone, like I can't even imagine what it feels like.
Yeah, I agree with everyone on this panel. And for me, like, I guess I had a small guiding light with my younger cousin, like kind of like what Tao said, when someone younger than you, they don't have that hatred built like kind of like in them, and so they are more accepting. So my cousin kind of was like my little small guiding light, but we were long distance, and so I couldn't like really relate to her a lot. So like in high school, I went through like a lot of struggles, kind of like a lot of like, I guess, anger and depression. My sister could see it, but I wasn't okay with myself to confide in her yet about like my identity and like who I identified. And it wasn't until I left and went to Minneapolis where I felt like, okay, this is like a new city, new me. I can like finally be who I want to be without any judgment from anyone. So I kind of like found like my allies, found like my support there with like my college roommate, my best friend now. And so like it just takes like time, and you know, it's a really hard struggle. Like I remember like those were like some of like the darkest years of my life, was like trying to figure out who I was in high school and like trying to basically balance 2 lives. And you know, when I got to college, I was like, screw this, I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. It's not worth the negative and mental energy. It just drains on you so much. And so like when I found that outlet, it just was so uplifting. And my college best friend was able to help push me to like, you know, tell your sister, like she probably knows and she'll accept you. I don't know why you're so scared. And, like he gave me that push to finally tell her, and like we've become closer because of that. I'm still close to a lot of my friends in college, and my cousin and I are still pretty close too. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And what will you tell young folks who are still not struggling with that? What will you give them? What advice will you give to them as to how to confront with their own sexuality, and what kind of help should they get, and what are some of from your own experience that you can provide them some guidance and comfort.
I think the first thing that anyone who is questioning their identity in terms of gender or sexuality is to tell themselves is that it is okay, and that you're not alone in this process. There is a lot of people who are going through the same thing, who are realizing their gender and identity does not fit in the boxes that the universe wants to put on us. And the first thing you can do in terms of accepting yourself is to try to get more resources about what identities that you would want to refer yourself as. Like for me, it was more in terms of trying to find a label, but a lot of times labels might not be a good idea for all the people. But for me, it was kind of like playing around and like almost like shopping for dresses, in terms of like I was trying to see what am I, because I did not feel like I was straight, but I didn't know what I was in the beginning. So it was more like, oh, am I bisexual or am I gay? And a lot of the times these words are not even available in Asian communities, because all we hear is slurs being used when it's being referred, even in movies or any mainstream, even in like bigger star movies or anything like that. And is to get more knowledge of, more aware of what are these identities about. So every time you read about something, you kind of feel like, oh, that sounds kind of like me. It fits, maybe it fits 80%. Maybe I'll try to look for more identities. And that way you kind of like find what fits you more. And in that exploration, you can also find a lot of online communities that are available, and you can always reach out to them, or I left my email on there. If anyone needs to talk about anything, can reach out to me. And it's, I guess, telling ourselves that it is okay that we are unsure who we are, and it is okay that we are different. And there are people like me who are existing, and are not only existing, but are surviving and doing great things. That constant reminder is important.
Thank you.
Okay. I've been sort of just thinking about what I would have liked to hear more when I was younger. And I would say, first and foremost, is that letting them know that their life is definitely worth something, and that there's nothing wrong with them, that, you know, they're okay. And I know there's that term, it gets better, but I know that's controversial because it can often seem like a blanket statement that's dismissive, that what they're going through is nothing. But I mean, it can get, you know, better as well, but acknowledge that it's not easy. I agree that resources definitely help a lot. For me, it was knowing that there were these clubs or these organizations or youth conferences, you know, depending. I know that people in rural communities struggle a lot because they don't have these resources. And I think that's where the online resources can help. And also, I believe that media representation helps a lot too. I think, you know, growing up, I didn't see anyone that was Asian and LGBT on TV. It was already hard to see people who were LGBT in general. And the more I see that, the more hopeful I feel. And I also feel very hopeful about the youth today when I think about like all the things with the Black Lives Matter movement, and then the stuff done of gun violence, and how the youth are really taking charge. I feel hopeful around youth being more progressive. So I really hope that it gets, I know it's not going to be perfect, but I hope it gets easier for LGBT youth. But I would say first and foremost, like, they just need to know their life is worth something. And when I think about the higher rates of suicide and depression with LGBT youth, I think it's because of that, just not feeling like your life has any meaning.
Yeah, same along with that. And I also would emphasize like there's no rush. Like there's no rush to give yourself a label. There's no rush to like find your identity. Like some people are figuring out their sexuality, their identity like well into their 40s, and people like my age. And so like I'm talking to someone now who's, you know, they're trying to figure out like how they identify and all that stuff. So I usually when I would advise like don't rush it. You know, it's a journey. It's something that you should discover and like at your own pace, at your own comfort, especially at your own safety too. And you can find resources in like the most strangest and weirdest places. I grew up in a rural area, cities. I didn't really have like, my school didn't have all these clubs or anyone for me to like realize, okay, who like my identity was. Actually, I figured out that I was a lesbian through anime, strange enough. So like you find resources in like the strangest places. So that's something I would encourage the youth today is like, just look at the media or like look at small things and like, how do you feel about it? Kind of like help you identify where you are along your path to finding yourself.
So I'll keep myself brief. I'm aware of the time, but I would say, you know, first of all, I have 4 nieces and nephews who are gay out of 16. So, you know, I've seen them all come out, and all I learned from that is that there's no right answer, you know, to what you do. I would offer up the best we can do is offer empathy, offer listening, and offer validation. But through the art of questioning, let them find their own course, because we don't know. So the worst thing we can do is provide solutions and say, go do this, go do this, go do this, you know, because this just not only is patronizing, but it doesn't allow them to follow their own journey. And each youth will be different. So you can meet someone who is 60 years of age and who may have the same struggles as someone who's 18 years of age. So we just really need to seek to understand, that's all.
Thank you for all of your thoughts and advice.
So we're just at time, and I am very much a stickler for honoring people's time, which most people appreciate when we're in meetings. So first of all, I just want to thank our panelists so very much for being so open and to this whole entire experience. I know a storytelling panel is a little different than what we're used to. So I just want to thank you again for being vulnerable with us and, you know, being your most authentic self in this space. And if anyone has any more questions, I put my email in there. It's corey.pluska@gmail.com. You can send them to me and I'll send them to the panelists and see if they feel like shooting us some answers. And I want to thank all of the people that tuned in. I know that tuning in on our computers right now after work can be quite a task. So I hope that you got everything out of this that you possibly wanted to coming into it. We do have a feedback form, you know, the surveys that none of you ever fill out and I never fill out when I go to these things. But if you want to throw us a bone and fill it out, it's in the chat. And we would really appreciate it. We just want to know what we did well and what we can do better, because we want to continue to bring you quality programming about topics and issues that you care about. So I know that all of our panelists have shared their contact information in the chat throughout the duration of this program. So it seems like they're all really open to chatting and answering any of your questions as well. So I just want to thank everybody so much. This was amazing.
Thank you.
So glad that this came together the way that it
Thank
did.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to all
Thank
the
you, everyone.
panelists.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
So good to see you all.
Good to see you too.
Thanks.
Yes.
We'll see you in Iowa.
Oh yes, yeah.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Yeah, Corey's visiting.
Oh,
Yeah,
It's true. Yeah, we're gonna make a little rounds while we're there.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Excited.
the social distance dinner or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was legit cracking up / tearing up multiple times throughout this whole panel. It was so good.
Aw.
I remember when we'd visit you at Iowa State. Like
Yeah.
after we all met, like, and y'all would like be in the women. Like I remember that, and I was like, wow, time goes by so fast.
I know it does.
I love
Sure.
sneaking into our classes and people are just like, who's this random girl here? And I'm just like, I have like my Japanese book and doing my Minnesota homework and they're like, what the heck is going on?
That's
So
awesome.
cute. I love that. Oh my God. I would so do that. Yeah, I would do that. For sure.
Yeah. Corey always comes when she visits. She always crashes like work programs with me, and everyone's like, "Who's this person?" Like,
That's what
Corey.
you do
She's here.
as a +1. Yep.
Yeah, just that
Always.
#1 fan. I need one of those big foam fingers. Like, go pee.
I should have done that.
I'm the same
too.
way. I'm showing up to your work thing, so it's mutual.
I know. I love
Right.
it. Anyway, you guys were so great. Enjoy your evening. I know you have something else to get to, but we'll definitely
Yeah.
connect about
Yeah.
our trip around Thanksgiving for sure.
Okay, sounds
Nice.
good. Yeah, and thank you so much, everyone. It was nice to meet you, and
Yeah.
everything went so well technically, so that was amazing. Yeah, like the technology was great, very easy to use.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye, Shri. Good to see you, Shri.
Bye.